Hello, everyone. This is William Myers, and you're watching Sword and Pen. I'm a Philadelphia lawyer and a Philadelphia author, and so I interview on the show authors and lawyers. Today, I am incredibly honored to have Marissa Bluestine, the executive director of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. Hello, Marissa.
Hi, Phil. Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to the show. You do great work,
Thank you.
and I've been looking forward to interviewing you for a long time. The first thing I want to talk about is you, Marissa. How did you get involved in social justice?
Oh, well, I've been involved in social justice my whole life. It was something my parents certainly really emphasized when we were children, that, it's, there's a Talmudic phrase that you have to engage to help make the world better. And that we really were brought up with that. My brother's a school teacher. My other brother was involved in politics with unions. So we've always really felt that it's our job to help improve the system, to look and find what's wrong and try to make it right. So, from a first blood drive run in high school, all the way through running a soup kitchen, on to being a public defender for 10 years before I came to the project, it really has been kind of in my DNA, if you will.
Where did you grow up?
Mostly in Connecticut, near West Hartford. And went to school at Trinity College in Connecticut, and then moved here after to run a soup kitchen for a few years.
Where was the soup kitchen?
In West Philadelphia. And then we decided to go to law school after that so that I could have a little bit more impact on people's lives and do broader change.
Marissa, where did you go to law school?
Temple.
Temple.
I am an owl, very proud. I bleed cherry red. When I graduated from law school, I went to the Philadelphia Defender Association, which is the public defender's arm for Philadelphia. To be honest, it wasn't really what I thought I wanted to do when I went to law school. I actually wanted to do housing work because I've been doing homeless work. But in my second and third year, took trial advocacy classes, just fell in love with being in court, and then did a clinical my third year, which is where law students actually go out and work directly with social service agencies or others, and worked at the defenders, and really just felt like it was an area that fit a lot of what I wanted to do, and to really be representing people, ensuring that the state had met its burden of proof, that what they have to show that an individual committed a particular crime. So I really felt that I was defending the Constitution as well as defending individuals throughout that job.
I want to talk to you about that, because a lot of defense attorneys that I talk to say that, because people who are not lawyers will say to me, how can a lawyer defend a criminal when they know they're guilty or they suspect they're guilty? And I try to say, well, they're not just fighting for that individual, they're fighting for everybody's rights. They're fighting to keep the state honest.
That's right. Because at any point, the state is so powerful. And at any point, if there's a slippage, if there's a way that they're able to get more powerful, or just not have to dot every I and cross every T, that's a danger for all of us. So from most criminal defense attorneys' perspective, it really is about ensuring that the evidence that they're bringing into court was gotten fairly without violating the Constitution, that it is sufficient to meet the burden of proof, and that all of the procedures that are guaranteed by the Constitution are protected. And that's a very big part of what criminal defense lawyers do every day. And most lawyers will kind of talk about it that way. So it really is, yes, this individual may have indeed committed the crime with which they are charged, but our Constitution requires that the state meet certain level of burden of proof, and that they've gotten the evidence in a way that doesn't violate our personal rights. Rights against search and seizure, to have rights against having police or law enforcement in our homes or our cars or other areas of privately protected.
So as a public defender, a lot of times you're going to be representing people that you may be convinced are guilty, but you're fighting for their rights.
That's right.
I am sure that from time to time you represented people where you're convinced of their innocence, and yet they end up convicted.
Yes, I have seen that happen.
How does that affect you emotionally? You're a defense attorney. You believe in your heart this person is innocent, and yet they're convicted, and so an innocent man or woman is going to go to jail. How does that affect you emotionally?
It's pretty devastating, particularly because as a lawyer, and I'm sure you feel the same way, that it's your job to represent your client, to hold your client up, to make sure that their voice is heard in that courtroom. And if it doesn't go the way that you truly believe that it should, it is a devastating impact. And then you are kind of trying to see where you can try to right that train. But the reality is that, at least in criminal justice, that it starts all the way back with the investigation from the police. And if that investigation gets off on the wrong track, it is very hard to stop or turn that train from where it's headed. And that you do see that. I mean, as a defense lawyer, I always say that the clients that you like best are the ones who know they committed the crime, who are prepared to do the consequences. They just want their day in court. That's fine. You have the absolute right to do that. I will represent you. The ones you lose the most sleep over are the ones who you believe to be innocent. And those are the ones that are really devastating. So needless to say, since I've started the project 10 years ago, I don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, I guess not.
It's a lot of sleepless nights. But it is a very different feeling when you are representing somebody who is found guilty, who committed the crime or parts of it, versus one who you believe had absolutely no role in it. It's terrifying.
And I've heard it said by defense attorneys that the hardest clients to represent, because of that, are the ones who you believe in.
Absolutely, because there may be times when you feel, as a lawyer, as an experienced lawyer, the state's going to meet their burden of proof, and the consequences for that conviction are going to be terrible. A very long prison sentence, or other collateral, side consequences of that. And the best advice you can give a client is to plead guilty to a lesser crime, so they get less time in prison and get home to their families earlier. So we know, without a doubt, that people who are innocent plead guilty. And it's not always because the lawyers are bad or they're not giving them good advice. Sometimes that's the best advice in that crucible, in that moment, that they can give.
What do you say to someone's family who sat through a trial, they know their son or their daughter's innocent, but they're convicted? What do you say to them about the system to keep their faith in the system, assuming they have faith in the system going into it? I mean, what do you say to somebody's parents or somebody's wife or somebody's husband to not make them be completely cynical?
Right. And that's the hardest part, is trying to have people maintain hope. And that's just a critically difficult thing. So when counseling, the lawyers or counselors, when counseling a client or family in that position, the best you can say is, okay, this is how we're going to proceed from here. There are avenues, there are ways to try to right this wrong, and we're going to work together every step of the way to try to make that happen. And the reality is that in the criminal justice system, once that conviction has been determined, it is very difficult to undo that under almost any circumstance.
So I read a passage in a book when I was young, and it was, "Our prisons are teeming with innocent men." And I think it was a book set in England. And I remember thinking, well, I'm glad that's not where I live.
Right.
I'm glad that we have this great justice system where innocent people don't go to prison, but we know innocent people do go to prison. Do you have, are there statistics, estimates on how many innocent people are actually in our prisons?
It's a great question. The short answer is no. We will never, ever know. And part of that is that there are thousands of counties in the United States. Each county has its own criminal justice system. They don't talk to each other. So there's no way to know on the state system, where most of the cases are tried in criminal courts is on the state side, not in federal courts. So there's no way to kind of track that information. The best we can do is kind of anecdotal collection of information. And so there is a website that is run, I think, out of Stanford Law School, the National Exoneration Registry, where they try to collect those stories and collect that information. And I think that the last time I checked, it was something like 2,300 cases had been tracked since 1989. About 350 of those are DNA cases. The others are not. But those are anecdotal. That's not by any means a scientifically sound number. There was a study which was approved by the National Institutes of Justice a few years ago about death row, people who had been convicted of crimes at trial and then sentenced to death. And the error rate that they estimated on that was 4%. Error rate meaning people who were innocent, did not commit the crime, were convicted of it nonetheless and sent to death row. And that's a pretty terrifying statistic because most of us, even lawyers, think, well, a death row case, that's going to have better lawyers, it's going to have more evidence, it's going to be a stronger case. And if you have a 4% rate of people who are actually innocent being convicted in that circumstance, what does that mean for the rest of the system where the evidence may not be as strong or the lawyering not as advocating? And then aside from the felonies, we have misdemeanors, which are small. You don't get as long a prison sentence. There's kind of smaller crimes. And we know without any doubt that people plead guilty to misdemeanors just to be able to get out of jail and get home, or for a number of reasons. And there's no telling what that number is. I don't think we'll ever know. So it's a terrifying thought.
So why is it that innocent people end up in prison? I mean, are there 2 or 3 or 4 scenarios, problems that you see happening over and over again? What are they?
And there are kind of 2 different ways to look at that. There's kind of 2 different buckets, if you will. So there's like evidence buckets. So whenever there's an exoneration, we kind of tear that case apart and we look at it and see, okay, what are the factors that happened in this case? And what we see in those factors are things like eyewitnesses who get on the stand and identify a defendant and are 100% certain that that's the guy that I saw, and yet are 100% wrong.
How does that, let me stop you because I've heard that.
It's fascinating.
How is that possible? Particularly like in an assault case.
Right.
The person's right there. They're spending time with you.
Right.
You can see them.
Right.
And the victim comes into trial and they're absolutely acting in good faith.
100%.
They absolutely believe this guy did it, and they want the bad guy to go to prison,
right.
But then DNA later exonerates him. How can we get it so wrong?
Because our memories are not like cameras, right? I mean, so if you ask most people how does memory work, a lot of them probably say it's like a camera, like a video camera. Right. You kind of take all the information in, you store it, you replay it, all good. That's not what memory does. Memory is actually more, scientists talk about it as reconstructed. Okay. So think of it more like a Wikipedia page, right? So it's more like there's this Wikipedia page and any amount of information can go into that page. And once that page is changed, it cannot go back in time. So your memory can be influenced by a host of other issues, things that happen while you're creating the memory itself. If you're distracted or under the influence, or if there's a gun that's involved or any kind of weapon, and it doesn't have to be a real gun, it could be a fake gun that you believe because your focus is on the weapon, not on the face of the person holding it. If you're under great stress, the brain is not really.
You're being assaulted. You're under tremendous stress.
Of course, but your brain's not focused on recording this information. It's focused on getting out and surviving. We know that what sometimes called cross-racial identifications are problematic. Okay. We really refer to those more as same group bias, that you're more likely to accurately identify somebody from what you perceive to be your own group than somebody outside of that group. So there are a number of kind of factors that go into that. And when you're kind of bringing that information into your brain and trying to hold on to it, if your brain is distracted, it's not going to get the whole picture. It just gets it in little pieces. And what's particularly fascinating, I think, about eyewitnesses in particular, is even after that memory is created, while it's kind of bouncing around in your neurons, it can be affected and changed. So if a victim or witness sees the wrong picture and kind of tries to put the pieces together, that missing pieces together around that face then becomes the face of the perpetrator, even if it's an innocent man. And we've seen that happen where a victim is shown a lineup and mistakenly identifies somebody in the lineup. The true perpetrator is standing in the lineup right next to them and not identified. Not because they're trying to get it wrong, not because they're trying to save him somehow. The memory just didn't recognize that person and focused in on the wrong person. But you're right, it's not intentional. No one's trying to get it wrong. It just happens because we're human and our brains don't process information through any kind of algorithm. It's just everybody's different.
So flash forward, you have that scenario. A person identifies another person as the assailant. DNA proves it's not the assailant. Now the person's out of prison.
Right.
Have you had any interactions with the victims where they're expressing how they're feeling about having identified the wrong
Sure.
person, and the wrong person has been in jail for 10 years.
Sure.
What do people feel? What do they say about that? The victims.
It's a horrifying position for them to be in. I mean, some don't accept that outcome. Some say, no, that's the person who committed the crime. I know it. I saw it. I experienced it. And they can't get out of that feeling. And I don't think that's wrong. It just is. And then you have people who can accept the outcome and accept that it was wrong, and they internalize not just the fact that this, the person who did this to them is still out there, right, which is the other issue, but that the guilt of having done it, when there's no guilt to be had. It's not a matter of guilt. It's just a matter of the process they went through was flawed, and it wound up in an incorrect identification. But that is a huge, huge issue, which is one of the reasons we try to work with the Office of Victims Advocate here in the Commonwealth, so that they can reach out to victims and try to provide some assurance and support for them as they're going through that process, because it can be so traumatic.
Let's talk about confessions. If I hear they confessed,
That's
obviously they did it, because nobody's going to confess to a
Right.
crime they didn't commit.
Right.
And yet we know
Happens
that
all the time.
happens. How? Well, let me ask you this. Say I'm a police officer, and I'll take this from completely the other angle.
Mhm.
I'm a police officer. I believe this person did it,
Mhm.
and I'm not leaving this room without a confession.
Mhm.
What are the tricks of the trade that I can employ to make sure I get this person to admit to the crime?
Well, I will just kind of touch the hypo a second, that I don't think most officers go into it with that kind of narrow-minded look. I think they're saying, yes, I think this person's a suspect, and I think he did it, but I don't know that it's kind of, I'm going to get this confession no matter what. The interrogation is designed to get the confession, but I would say that most officers going into that scenario don't necessarily have that kind of single-focused outcome in mind. But so in the United States, remember, it's not illegal for the police to lie to a suspect.
I think most people don't know that. If the police
Yeah,
officer
I think that's true.
says, we have an eyewitness
Right.
who saw, then
Right.
people think, oh, they must have an eyewitness.
That's right. And that's exactly right. And that's exactly what happens. So in the interrogation room, they are allowed to lie. They're allowed. It's called a false evidence ploy, is the way that it's taught. A false evidence ploy.
Okay.
You feed false evidence to the suspect, and that is designed to, in the mind of the interrogator, kind of encourage somebody to come forward and be more truthful. But what it can do is create coercion and create pressure to confess to something that they didn't do. So I have a client who was told exactly that. We have 3 eyewitnesses who saw you. None of that was true. None of that was true. We know your car was involved. Absolutely untrue. Did not happen. And kind of gave him information that they had. And throughout the course of several hour interrogation, my client started to believe, I'm not getting out of here unless I say what they want to say. Now, the problem here is, ironically, people who are innocent are more at risk for giving a false confession because they trust the process. They don't know their rights. They don't know to say, hey, I want to talk to a lawyer. I'm stopping this now until I talk to a lawyer. They don't know that they have that ability. So we've seen interrogations go on for hours. And what happens in the mind of the person who's being interrogated is, they want to hear something. I'm going to say what they want to hear, or I'm not getting out of this room. And that's how it does. So through the false evidence ploy, the suspect learns information about the case. I mean, I've seen cases where officers say to the suspect, we have your DNA on the ligature around the neck. Well, now the person knows she was strangled with some kind of rope, right? So that's how they get that information, to be able to kind of spit back. But the jury hasn't seen or heard that entire process. So all they hear is the end result. They think exactly what I would think. You said it, you must have done it. Which is why we promote strongly videotaping the entire interaction with police, so that juries can see where that information came from.
Who makes that
Who
decision?
does that?
Who makes the decision, yes or no, this interview is going to be?
That's the department, the police department. There's no requirement in Pennsylvania that it be done. But individual police departments are doing it on their own. So Philadelphia does it, Montgomery County does it, Allegheny County. There are other counties where the police do want to record, and they'll start recording from the very beginning of that interaction all the way through. And I'll say this, I don't know of a single department across the country, and there are hundreds that have voluntarily adopted that have gone back. They've all said, you know what, this is the right thing to do. We want this. It's good evidence. And I'll tell you, from a criminal defense standpoint, having the video there and to have the jury run the risk of seeing a person who looks pretty non-repentant on the screen, that can be very devastating. But it cuts down on the kind of, he said, he was beating me, no I wasn't, or he was coercive, no I wasn't. And it gives the fact finder all the information they need to try to make that determination. So it's a pretty easy fix. And what we've seen is that it can really, it doesn't prevent somebody from falsely confessing, but in those circumstances, it gives the fact finder enough information to try to come to a decision about whether they were or not.
So let me shift gears a little bit, and let's just talk about the Pennsylvania Innocence Project.
Sure.
I've heard of innocence projects nationwide. Just tell people how it's organized.
Sure. So they're actually worldwide.
Worldwide.
There are innocence organizations in Taiwan, in Israel, in Africa. They're all over the world. But each one is an independent organization. There's no mothership, as they say. So we are all independent actors. The Pennsylvania Innocence Project this is our 10th year. So we are having our 10th anniversary this year. It's quite a big deal. We're very excited. And we've been around for 10 years. We work only in Pennsylvania. Our mission is to identify and free people who are convicted of crimes they did not commit. They had no role in.
Stop you with that.
Yeah.
Because I think there are some people out there who will assume that what you're trying to do is use legal loopholes to maybe get some people who actually did commit the crime off.
And I understand that. I do.
But what the Innocence Project does is you're looking for people who did not commit the crime.
That is correct. In fact, when we start investigating a case, we start from the presumption of guilt. And I tell this to all of our students, all of our investigators, all of our lawyers. Presume the guy did it. And go where the facts go. And if the facts show that he didn't, or that there's strong evidence that somebody else did, then we have a case.
What's the process? How many layers of investigation do you go through before you give it the green light and say, this guy or this woman did not do it, we are going after this?
Right, a lot. So we starts with a letter from the convicted individual, just writes and says, I didn't do it. Right? I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm beyond my appeals, because in Pennsylvania you have a right to have an attorney on certain levels of appeals. We won't get into that. We only have 4 lawyers that cover the whole state. So we're pretty stringent in terms of the cases that we take for that reason. And then we give it kind of a first review. We'll read the court opinions and the written arguments or briefs that attorneys file on behalf of their clients. And we read those. We say, okay, is it possible, is it plausible that this person was convicted of a crime they didn't commit? If we feel that is, then we'll move it to what we call stage 3, where we try to get every piece of paper we can about a case, the trial transcripts, motions, discovery, whatever we can find, and try to piece that together. Is it possible that this person was convicted of a crime they did not commit? And because when we started, it was just me. I was the only lawyer on staff when we started.
Okay.
I started a program we call Case Review. So we bring in lawyers who have extensive criminal justice experience. I want a majority of them to have been prosecutors, either state or federal at some point. And we present the case to them. And we say, here's the case. And our students are trained when they're writing the reports, don't advocate, just put the facts in. Good, bad, neutral, everything goes in, give it to the panel. And then the panel decides whether we can move forward or not. Because I wanted to check on our own internal bias, that I was worried that we weren't looking at the case the right way, or we kind of had blinders on. So this way we get an objective view. And I think we're actually the only innocence organization in the world, as far as I know, that uses a process like that to kind of check ourselves. And then if the panel approves it, then we can go forward with investigation. And we will talk to every witness we can talk to, including police officers and prosecutors and judges and jurors.
But an investigative staff to do that?
I have a staff investigator, yes, and we have a part-time investigator in our Pittsburgh office as well. We have an office out in Pittsburgh now. And they are both trained law enforcement professionals. They know what they're doing. And again, we start from that presumption of guilt. And we talk to people and just see what the facts do. We don't ask leading questions. It's not, I'm from the Innocence Project. I think this person is innocent. What can you tell me? What do you know about this murder? What do you know about what happened? And we go where the facts go. If the facts support innocence and enough to get into court, we'll file in court. We co-counsel with teams of lawyers.
Let me ask you, what level of court do you file? Do you have to file with the trial court, or do you file with an appellate court? Who do you file with?
Great
first?
question. So all of these kinds of petitions, which are called PCRA, Post-Conviction Relief Act petitions, have to be filed in the trial court. That's the law. So we go back to sometimes the same judge who convicted the individual, and we file the petition. We say, we have evidence. We have new evidence that the jury didn't hear about. And if the jury had heard about it, they would have come to a different conclusion. That's most of the cases that we do. And that evidence could be DNA, could be a true perpetrator confessing, could be eyewitnesses who were afraid to come forward before, could be any variety. It could be a change in science in some of these cases. And we go back and we say, if the jury had heard this, it would have. Now, it's not saying, this person's innocent, let them out. Pennsylvania law doesn't have that. So we have to couch it in terms of, if the jury had heard this, they would have reached a different verdict. Doesn't mean that we don't believe that they're innocent, but we only have this one vehicle to be able to do it. So that's what we do. And then we co-counsel with lawyers from all over the state. We have about 25 cases that we're litigating now. We've had 14 cases reversed in the 10 years, which is a pretty extraordinary number. As of today, one of those, Mr. Roberts out in Dauphin County near Harrisburg, he's going to be either retried or let go because the Commonwealth didn't further appeal that decision by the court. So
let me do this because the time is running out. Give us one case that you think is inspirational, where you won freedom for somebody who's been in prison.
Right. So one of the easiest stories I think is our client Dante Rollins. So Dante was 19 when he was convicted of participating in shooting in North Philadelphia. What the jury didn't hear was that at the time of the shooting, which was in the Strawberry Mansion section of Philadelphia, Dante was shopping on South Street with some friends of his. And that's about 7 to 10 miles away. At the very same moment. In fact, there was video of him going in and out of stores, time-stamped, showing him on his cell phone.
Miles away.
Miles away. There was video of him on his cell phone. There were cell phone records, which verified he was on his cell phone, and here's the numbers he called. During that time, there were 4 witnesses that he was with, 4 men he was with who were in the video with him. The jury didn't see any of that.
Why?
The lawyer chose not to present it.
His lawyer had it.
His own lawyer had it.
Not to present it.
That is correct. That's right. So the case involved, there was a witness who identified Dante by name. He said it was Dante who was doing the shooting. So it was an eyewitness error. It was lawyer error because the lawyer did not present that evidence to the jury. And arguably there was prosecutorial error for not understanding what that evidence meant and following it through. Dante was convicted. He served 10.5 years in prison before he was released, just before Christmas in 2017. In fact, his mother, just this year, put up a Christmas tree for the first time because she hadn't done it since he was arrested. But for the first time, she felt her family had been reunited. So every case we have, it's never just one thing. There's always a number of factors that went in to reverse those convictions.
So if I'm someone who believes in this and I want to help donate money to the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, how do I do that?
And that's critical to our sport because there are no government funds for this. There are no government programs. So we have an event coming up in May, which will be a terrific event in Philadelphia. People can come to and learn more about the project. But the easiest way is just go to our website, which is innocenceprojectpa.org.
Innocenceprojectpa.org.
Right.
Okay.
And
let me stop you there because my producer is giving me this.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is Bill Myers. You're watching Sword and Pen, and we had Marissa Bluestine with us, the executive director of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. Thank you for watching.